Hey everyone, Erick Stakelbeck here. Today on the Newscast, a breaking Middle East update with one of the top experts on the region from Israel. Get all the latest news on Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, Arab-Israel peace deals, and why it all matters to you. Stick around. Hey folks, Erick Stakelbeck here. Welcome to the Watchman Newscast. Well, it's only Tuesday, but it's already been a very eventful week in the Middle East, both for good and for bad. Let's start with the good. Just yesterday, Monday, August 31st, we saw the first ever commercial flight from Israel to the United Arab Emirates as an El Al plane took a joint U.S.-Israeli delegation with top government officials from both nations, took them from Tel Aviv to Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates to have meetings with top officials from the UAE. Not only that, the plane actually passed over Saudi airspace, clearly with the full consent of Saudi Arabia. Folks, this would have been unthinkable just 5 years ago, but today it is a reality. To me, this is a great thing. We see the Sunni Arab nations moving closer to Israel as they jointly try to offset that looming Iranian axis that is casting its shadow throughout the region. So the cooperation between Israel and the UAE, Jordan, Egypt, potentially Oman, Bahrain, and yes, even Saudi Arabia is a positive development in my view. So that's the good. But this week started with the bad. You most likely did not hear this in the mainstream media, but the leader of Hezbollah, Sheikh Hassan Nasrallah, gave a speech on Sunday, August 30th, in which he declared that Hezbollah is right now actively seeking to murder an Israeli soldier. Nasrallah says this is vengeance for an airstrike in late July in Syria in which a Hezbollah fighter was killed. Reportedly, Israel carried out this airstrike, and Hezbollah's tradition has been tit for tat. If a Hezbollah fighter is killed, Hezbollah will seek to kill an Israeli soldier in return. So Nasrallah says they are actively seeking right now to do just that. And he said, and I quote, "We are in no hurry." Now, we've talked about here on the newscast, and you can look in our archives here on YouTube, we've talked about these two attempts over the past few weeks of Hezbollah fighters to engage Israeli soldiers on that Lebanon-Israel border, but apparently that did not suffice for Nasrallah. He quite literally wants Israeli blood. So we're keeping an eye on that. Again, the north, Israel's border with Lebanon, continues to be an absolute powder keg, folks. Anything can set it off, and that's why I'm very fortunate to have today my good friend Avi Melamed from Israel. He is joining us. He is one of the top experts on the region. He's got experience throughout the Middle East. He's the author of a great book called Inside the Middle East. We're going to talk to Avi in a second to break down Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, the Israel-Arab peace deals, what it all means for America, for Israel, for you, no matter where you live. But before we get into it, I just want to encourage you to subscribe to the Watchman News channel right here on YouTube. Click the notification bell so you get alerts every time a new video is posted. Remember, we've got the newscast for you every week, plus clips from the Watchman TV show, which you can see on TBN if you're here in the U.S. If you don't live here in the U.S., you can catch all the clips and the shows right here on our YouTube channel. So be sure to subscribe because, again, folks, we're bringing you the kind of cutting-edge, timely information that you just won't hear anywhere else, certainly not in the mainstream media. Okay, let's get into it with Avi Melamed, top expert on the Middle East and why it all matters, again, to you. Take a look. Well, Avi, welcome back to the Watchman. It is always great to have you, my friend.
Hi, Eric. Thank you for having me. As always, it's my pleasure. This time it's from a distance, but hopefully next time we'll be together again on the ground.
Yes, hopefully in the not-so-distant future, Avi, we'll be together, like you said, on places like the Israel-Syria border. Hey, a good place to start. Just last night, Avi, overnight, reportedly, there was an airstrike in Damascus, and again, reportedly, some 11 Iranian-backed fighters were killed. What can you tell us about that?
Well, apparently there has been another reportedly attack attributed to Israel. Today it's quite known. Israel admitted openly that for the last couple of years it has been attacking hundreds of times Iranian positions and Iranian proxies positions in Syria. Israel is determined to prevent the Iranian plan to establish in Syria an infrastructure of thousands of rockets and missiles and militants that no doubt one day will be aimed at Israel. So Israel is determined to prevent that. By the way, recently, the Israeli Air Force released open information actually saying that for the last couple of years, the Israeli Air Force has conducted some 5,000 operation, and the amount of ammunition the Israeli airport used targeting the Iranians and their proxies in Iran is equal to the amount of a fully scale 30 days war in the Middle East.
Wow, Avi, incredible. I mean, it has been the Israeli Air Force has gone on the offensive, and rightly so, because as you said, Avi, look, the Iranian regime, Hezbollah, they're playing for keeps, and they are trying to establish a permanent foothold there near the Syria-Israel border. Now, this airstrike, reported airstrike last night, was a big one, obviously. We'll see the fallout that may be yet to come. But there was another airstrike in that Damascus area, Avi, in late July, and we're still seeing the fallout from it. A Hezbollah fighter was killed. Now Sheikh Hassan Nasrallah is vowing to murder an Israeli soldier in retaliation. What can you tell us about that?
Yes, Hezbollah actually not only vowed, he was trying to retaliate at least twice, if not 3 times. Up until now, all of the attempts have been failed, intercepted by Israeli forces. The story beyond that, to the best of my understanding, is that since the Iranians are so undergoing Israeli military pressure in Syria, as we just talked about, the Iranians are looking for a way to reshape a new balance of mutual deterrence. And seemingly, they chosen Hezbollah and Lebanon to be the stage from which they will try to create a new balance of deterrence. In other words, what they are trying to do is to create a balance of fear with Israel, saying, if Israel will continue to attack in Syria, we will retaliate every single time a Hezbollah member will get killed. In other words, this is an attempt to basically stop or at least minimize the Israeli activities in Syria. Once again, we see how the Mullah regime in Tehran has no moral restrictions whatsoever to sacrifice everybody else. This time it's the Lebanese yet again. And he has a very loyal proxy in the shape of the Hezbollah in Lebanon, who already more than once dragged Lebanon to abyss in the service of the Iranians. So Hezbollah, Nasrallah vowed to retaliate. He was trying to retaliate. And the interesting thing is that as far as they are concerned, their PR line as of now is that we haven't done anything yet. The big one is yet to come. I would doubt that for now, even though in the Israeli intelligence there is a basic assessment that the Hezbollah may try again to carry out some retaliation. However, I personally doubt if Hezbollah is going to pursue that path in the visible future, mostly because of the current situation in Lebanon, which is basically sinking in the abyss with everyone on board, including the Hezbollah.
Yeah, Avi, 2 questions. Number one, how much does all that chaos that you're mentioning in Lebanon, including the Beirut blasts a month ago, how much does that impact Hezbollah's future moves in the region? Does it handicap Hezbollah in a sense? And number 2, if the Iranian regime tells Hezbollah to strike, Hezbollah must obey its Iranian master, right?
Let's start with the second question. Roughly speaking, the answer is yes. However, in the dialogue that has been evolving between the Hezbollah and its major master, the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, there has been some shift of power, particularly following the killing of the former leader of Al-Quds Force, Major General Qasem Soleimani, who was, as you may remember, eliminated by the United States strike in January 3rd, 2020. His replacer, General Ismail Qani, to the best of my knowledge and accumulative information, indicates that his replacer, Qani, struggles to enter Soleimani's big shoes, and as part of that, he is today in a different position of discussion with the Hezbollah people, and particularly leader Hassan Nasrallah. Nasrallah was much more tuned, apparently, to the orders coming from Soleimani. Today, with Kani, it seems like Hezbollah has a larger maneuvering space. And by the way, mentioning Kani, going back to what you started with, Eric, last night's strike in Syria, there has been rumors, and I emphasize rumors. I have not come across any kind of serious information that supports that, but there has been rumors arguing that last night, Kani, the commander of Al-Quds force, was killed in the attack attributed to Israel. I do emphasize again, these are rumors. I have no kind of any confirmation for that, and we'll leave it like that as for now.
Yeah, and folks, if and when that is verified to be true, Avi will be one of the first people to know. He has excellent sources on the ground throughout the Middle East. Okay, Avi, we're talking about this threat from the north, and we've been talking about it a bunch here on the Watchman, this coming conflict. It seems like a conflict is obviously coming eventually between Israel and Hezbollah, the Iranian regime, in the north, Syria, Lebanon. But how about the south, an area you also know very well? Gaza has been heating up as of late. What's the latest there? Could we see yet another major flare-up between Israel and Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, the Iranian proxies to the south in Gaza?
Well, Eric, the latest is it seemingly like things are coming down in the area of Gaza. Just yesterday, there has been sort of like a breakthrough, sort of speaking, in the discussions going on among the players involved, meaning Israel, Hamas, Egypt, Islamic Jihad, Qatar. There has been sort of understanding about a new arrangement on the ground that on the one hand will partly meet Hamas needs, not fully, and on the other hand also will meet Israel's need. The bottom line is that as of today, seemingly, things in Gaza are towards, at least for the visible future, to come down. Yet again, as we know in our crazy neighborhood, things could change in a heartbeat. There is constantly, in the context of Gaza, what I'm calling constantly walking on the edge. Hamas and Islamic Jihad in a way, Israel also in a way, but particularly the Palestinian factors in Gaza Strip, walking on the edge, meaning trying to exhaust or to try and to manipulate a situation in order to get the best they can with the cards they have in their hands. And sometimes it is very close to the red line, sort of speaking. But the sides have been quite cautious, all of them, including Israel, not to cross red lines because neither of the sides have real interest in a massive eruption today and in the visible future in the context of Gaza Strip.
Very interesting, Avi. Walking the tightrope down south and to the north, obviously, with Hezbollah. Hey, speaking of Hamas, a Hamas delegation visited Istanbul last week and met with Turkish President Erdogan. Avi, how concerned are you about Erdogan and his activities in the region? He seems like a destructive force.
Yes, Erdogan is playing a very significant role. Now, here is something interesting about Erdogan. Erdogan is a bully, but he's a very sophisticated politician, and he actually changed dramatically Turkey within less than 2 decades. Erdogan is inspired, I would even say obsessed, with a vision of reviving the glorious day of the Turkish Ottoman Empire. And he is leading a hegemonic vision. He is actually focusing in simultaneously in couple arenas, in some arenas. One of them, for example, is the eastern basin of the Mediterranean and the central part of the Mediterranean. It centers around the story of the huge gas reservoir in the eastern basin of the Mediterranean. Erdogan would like to be the one who called the shot. Now, the issue is that there are other regional players like Israel, like Egypt, like Greece, like Cyprus, who has interest in those gas fields. And basically what we see today is that Erdogan is on a collision track or a friction track with those players that I mentioned before around the story of the gas. But that's not the only collision track that he is on. Erdogan, as you may know, Eric, is also involved in the war in Libya. There is a civil war in Libya going on for the last couple of years, and Erdogan is involved directly in the war in Syria, meaning he sent to Syria thousands, apparently thousands, I don't have the accurate number, but accumulative information suggests that we are talking about the low thousands of Syrian and non-Syrian jihadists from the north part of Syria who are actually controlled and monitored by Erdogan. He sent them to fight in Libya next to the side of the government of consensus, the government of Sarraj, and supporting other Muslim Brotherhood militias in Libya. Erdogan involvement in Libya fuels a growing tension with Egypt because Erdogan and Egypt are on a serious collision track. Egypt, as well as Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, are definitely not happy, to say the least, with Erdogan's hegemonic vision, and they are trying to blocking and thwart it. There was a period of time, a couple of weeks ago, that things between Egypt and Turkey escalated to the point Egypt army was in higher alert because Egypt basically said that as far as it's concerned, Libya is a red line for Egypt. Now, the growing tension in the eastern basin of the Mediterranean because of Erdogan's ambitions and proactive aggression resulted in stepping in a quite untypical way, I would say, stepping in of France and Italy that basically are sending very strong signals to Erdogan saying, back off, enough is enough. A couple of days ago, there has been a joint military drill of France, Greece, Cyprus, Egypt, including live ammunition, live fire. That was a very clear signal to Erdogan. Currently in Libya, by the way, there has been sort of a ceasefire, and apparently for now it's being kept. So this is one arena that Erdogan is invested in very much, causing a lot of disturbing. There is another interesting arena that most of people are not aware. I'll take you, Eric, and the viewers thousands of miles away from the eastern basin of the Mediterranean to another sea, the Indian Ocean. If you just visualize the map in front of you, Eric, you see the Gulf area, Yemen, going south down towards the Indian Ocean. There is a group of islands called Socotra, some 200 or something miles south from Yemen, in the sea. It's part of Yemen. In the last year and a half or so, there has been an ongoing battle over control over those islands. The sides to the fight were, on the one hand, the United Arab Emirates and a Yemenite force which is backed by the United Arab Emirates, and the other side was the government, the Yemenite ousted government forces and militias that are associated or affiliated with the Muslim Brotherhood. Guess who support them?
Erdogan.
By the way, that battle was decisively won by the United Arab Emirates. Bad news for Erdogan. Not so bad news for other state in the region that is called Israel.
Yeah, you know, Avi, I am so glad that you just broke that down for us. These are two topics related to Turkey that not a lot of people are talking about here in the West. Number one, what they're doing in the Eastern Mediterranean. Number two, in Libya and even off the coast of Yemen. People don't know the reach that Erdogan is attempting to acquire right now. Avi, as you said, looking to establish that new caliphate and establish a new modern-day Ottoman Empire. Hey, you also mentioned the UAE, United Arab Emirates. We can close here on a positive, encouraging note after we did kind of the drive-through around all the chaos in the region. But hey, Israel just yesterday, first commercial flight from Tel Aviv to Abu Dhabi. You have Israel, the UAE with this new peace deal, possibly Bahrain, Oman, even the Saudis coming to the table. You've been writing about this a lot, especially in your great book, Inside the Middle East, and at avimelamed.com. I'd say, Avi, you saw this coming a few years ago. You were writing about this, and I was talking to you about it. What's your sense right now about this development and where things are heading?
Well, Eric, yes, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Indeed, I saw it coming a couple of years ago. I wrote about it in different platforms, including in my book. Historical day, great day indeed. A lot of excitement. You should see the reactions in the Gulf, in the United Arab Emirates. It's wonderful to see that. Gives a lot of hope. However, a couple of notes just to say. First, guess who was vocally opposing the agreement? I'll give you a hint. We just talked about him.
Erdogan and
the
Iranian regime.
Erdogan and Iran strongly opposed the agreement.
Yes.
The reason for that is very simple and very cynical and very sophisticated. They are basically, Iran and Turkey have an interest that the Israeli-Palestinian conflict will linger on endlessly, and if possible, escalate. That would be better. It plays to the hands of both Iran and Erdogan. That's the reason why they took such a harsh, tough rhetoric condemning the agreement. The agreement indicates, one of the major things it indicates is the downgrading significantly issue of the Palestinian cause within the agenda and priorities of the Arab world. It is also something that we have been talking about many times before in different forums. Finally, in that context, I would just add something else. There has been talking about an upcoming peace agreement with another Arab state. In that context, states that were mentioned are Bahrain, Sudan, even Saudi Arabia. To the best of my evaluation, it's not going to happen. I don't see another peace agreement with those states in the visible future because of practical and political reasons mostly. So I think that we will have to wait a little bit longer with that. But just the same, the agreement between Israel and the United Arab Emirates, very substantial and historical event in the region, and hopefully would lead to some better outcomes.
Yeah, we shall see, my friend. And an encouraging note that flight from Tel Aviv to Abu Dhabi passed over Saudi airspace, which is something that would have been unimaginable even 5 years ago. But now we're in a new day and it's happening. And by the way, folks, Avi is also a fluent Arabic speaker. So Avi, every day you're reading all of the newspapers throughout the Gulf, throughout the region, which is invaluable to your analysis. Thank you so much for joining us, Avi. Again, folks, avimelamed.com and Inside the Middle East. Check it out. Avi, thanks again. We'll see you again soon.
My pleasure, Eric. Take care. Be well.
Thanks again to Avi for that great analysis. Folks, you can check Avi's work out at avimelamed.com. Also, pick up his book, Inside the Middle East, at amazon.com or wherever books are sold. He is one of the best, and we always love being on the ground with Avi in Israel. Hopefully, we'll do it again very soon. Hey, thanks for joining us today on the Watchman Newscast. Until Thursday, God bless you. And remember, never hold your peace.